I would now like to invite Councillor Mitchell, as leader of the second opposition group, to speak and move the Greens' alternative budget proposals and amendments. You have up to 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mayor. So today is my inaugural speech as the leader of the Green Party in Brent, and it would be remiss of me not to point out that I am the first female leader of a political party in Brent in nearly 15 years. And I want us all to start by asking ourselves what the culture is that we are building in this place that is so inaccessible to so many, because we are 50% of the population and we are still not even close to being properly represented in this chamber. It's not just about representation, it's about increasing trust in politics. And this matters, and it's not good enough. But this afternoon is about the budget. We can't talk about this Labour budget for Brent without talking about the decisions that have been made by a national Labour government that has got us here today. We are still hearing claims from across the chamber that austerity rests entirely at Conservative feet. But we now have a national Labour government. And we are still looking at another £10.4 million of cuts for local people in Brent and a council tax hike of nearly 5% in the middle of a cost of living crisis. Keir Starmer's funding settlement has completely failed to tackle extreme income inequality and deal with the underlying financial stresses that local government faces. Councillor Butt himself just referred to a promise of change. The reality is there is no change. While this Labour administration may claim to have safeguarded some of the most vulnerable from ongoing austerity and have finally decided to invest some funding from developer contributions into local services, just before an election, I might add, let there be no mistake. This budget will hit residents where it hurts. There is no glossing it up and pretending otherwise, because this budget represents more money in the pockets of billionaire donors to the Labour Party and less in the pockets of Brent residents. This isn't about alternative budgets and scrabbling around taking money from one service line to pay for another. That is the wrong conversation, because you can't contrast a budget written over months by highly skilled financial professionals with budget amendments built by under-resourced opposition parties. This is about austerity, and this is a choice. So what would the Green Party do differently? Nationally, we'd introduce a fairer, greener tax system, taxing income from wealth the same as income from work, and we'd use it to properly fund local government. And this is rooting in the real world, again, to use Councillor Butt's phrase. Locally, our amendments focus on 3 priorities: a fast, fair energy transition, housing justice, and protecting Brent's green spaces. On energy, we'd invest in retrofitting and community-owned renewable energy, cutting carbon, lowering bills, and keeping energy wealth in Brent. On housing, we'd strengthen enforcement against road landlords, tackle unlicensed HMOs, create a dedicated housing scrutiny committee to drive up standards and accountability. On the environment, we'd bring back free bulky waste collections to reduce fly tipping. We'd invest in trees and biodiversity, and we'd better protect green spaces for all Brent residents. We'd fund this through efficiencies identified in our amendment, through a small and responsible use of strategic SIL focused on long-term earmarked funds, rather than removing investments that have already been baked in for this financial year, and fairer parking charges that ask the biggest, most polluting vehicles to pay more for their impact, which would be spent legally on traffic calming and active travel. We're also calling on this administration to be bolder, to pursue income generation more proactively, to recover unpaid council tax from those who can pay, and to lead on priorities like the energy transition through genuine partnership and real community engagement, not tokenistic and costly low-impact initiatives like Brent Connect. This budget further perpetuates austerity and is another indication of Keir Starmer's 360-degree turn on his principles since becoming Labour Party leader. When a Labour government chooses to take more donations from companies controlled by super-wealthy individuals than from trade unions, which the Labour Party did for the first time since its founding in 1900 in the run-up to this general election, it no longer represents ordinary people, but is doing the bidding of a small group of wealthy donors, supporting interests of continued wealth and resource extraction. The Green Party is now the only party that represents the people, and the polls show that London is with us. We will therefore be voting against this budget, Because for Brent residents, austerity with a red rosette is just the same as austerity with a blue rosette.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This budget, like every budget I've been a part of, is defined by decades of institutional failure, and housing is the clearest example of it. Labour talks about housing numbers, but not enough about housing standards, housing management, or whether tenants can actually hold landlords to account. The Regulator of Social Housing highlighted serious failures from this council. These weren't just technical errors. The real issue is failure in governance, and exactly the sort of failure proper, formal scrutiny is supposed to catch. And this is not just about the council as a landlord. In my ward, residents in Quintain properties have raised serious concerns about steep rent hikes, opaque bills, and unfair evictions. And whilst Quintain disputes some of these claims, residents need somewhere to turn to when power is concentrated and accountability is weak. This also sits in a longer political failure. Labour governments helped build the stock transfer and arm's length model, which has pushed housing decisions further away from direct democratic control. And tenants are still living with that legacy. If Brent Labour will not challenge its own government or break with this failed model, then at the very least it should allow proper scrutiny. This is why our amendment creates a dedicated housing scrutiny committee to scrutinise all landlords, including the council itself, and put standards, safety and accountability first. Starmer's Labour promised change, a promise the councillors sitting opposite echoed on the doorstep. But residents are getting the same old cynical politics. Protect the machine, protect the big money backers, and leave people to live with the consequences. Labour lied, and the councillors opposite don't seem to find that objectionable. This hypocrisy and cynicism is why voters are turning away in their millions. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.